We're not talking about actors. We mean a real monster.
I brought her back. She'll live and I'll get her another body.
I know they're gonna kiss me, but don't let anyone see me like that. Please, Doctor, help me!
Biologically speaking, it's of primary importance that man should want to mate. Hey, that's...
You don't get all your kicks from surfing, do you?
We want to be free to ride our machines without being hassled by the man. And we want to get loaded.
You think you're gonna make a slave of the world? I'll see you in hell first!
The American International Podcast.
Are you ready?
Ahoy and welcome to the American International Podcast. I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And I'm Jeff Markin.
And today we're talking about Operation Bikini from 1963.
Operation Bikini was directed by Anthony Carras. Written by John Tomerlin. Produced by Lou Rusoff and James H. Nicholson, with Samuel Z. Arkoff named as executive producer.
Operation Bikini stars Tab Hunter as Lieutenant Morgan Hayes, Frankie Avalon as Seaman Joseph Malzone, Scott Brady as Captain Emmett Carey, Jim Backus as First Mate and Fennelly, Gary Crosby as Seaman Floyd Givens, Michael Dante as Lieutenant William Fourtney, Jody McCrea as Seaman William Sherman, Eva Six as Reiko, Aleong as Seaman Ronald Davayo, David Landfield as Lieutenant Cale, Richard Bakalyan as Seaman Hillier.
Also appearing are Joe Finnegan as Seaman Morris, Vernon Scott as Seaman Fowler, Raymond Guth as Seaman Rich, Tony Scott as Chief Petty Officer Perez, Steve Mitchell as Seaman Nolan, Mickey McDermott as Seaman Fairley, Wayne Whitten as Seaman Patterson, Dwayne Ament as Seaman Kingsley, Jody Daniels as Seaman Jones, Mark Cavell as Paul, Rainham K. Tsukamoto as Kawai, Lan Nam Tuttle as Mika, Alicia Lee as Native Girl Number 3, Nancy Ducina as Roxanne, the Dream Girl Back Home, and Judy Lewis as the Dream Siren.
Operation Bikini opens on a ship at sea in glorious black and white. The music grows insistent and even suspenseful as we dive under the sea in a submarine. The title card reads August 1944, South Pacific. We are at war.
And to show this, we are presented with a montage of battleships being bombed.
We see a Japanese flag and then we get a look at war from the vantage point of inside a submarine being bombed.
After the chaos and destruction, we find ourselves in calmer times. There are two naval officers looking out at sea through binoculars from atop their submarine, which is now not submerged.
It goes up and down.
One of these men is Lieutenant Bill Fourtney, and he asks the other, Lieutenant Jim Cale, to take over as he's going below.
Once below, we meet the captain of the ship. It's Captain Emmett Carey. He's upset that the Grayfin is missing. And Lieutenant Bill gives him a communique from ComSubPac. He doesn't read it out loud right away. Lieutenant Bill sends a message back to ComSubPac. They've attempted to rendezvous with the Grayfin for 3 days with no response. Lieutenant Bill expresses his condolences to Captain Carey. He knows that Captain Carey served on the Grayfin and knows a lot of the men on that ship.
And this is the opportunity that Captain Carey has to read these orders that he's received. The orders are for them to wait for another ship, the Albany. Lieutenant Fourtney wants to know the reason why they're waiting, but Captain Carey doesn't know. But he does decide that while they're waiting, they may be able to sink a few Japanese ships in retaliation.
After some lantern flashing, Lieutenant Bill and Captain Carey see the Albany approach. They have a special assignment for a UDT, an underwater demolition team. What do they want, Lieutenant Bill wonders? A ride, says Carey.
A boat carrying the demolition crew from the Albany and Lieutenant Morgan Hayes asks permission to board. Lieutenant Fourtney grants permission, and the demolition team consisting of Lieutenant Hayes, Seaman William Sherman, Seaman Ronald Davayo, Seaman Joseph Malzone, Seaman Floyd Givens, and Sergeant Ed Fennelly board the submarine.
We're going to say Seaman so many times in this episode. Lieutenant Hayes has an important message to give the captain, and it does involve all the men, so all of them get to board. They're told where to go and where to store their gear. On his way up from the boat where they're moored to the submarine, Seaman Malzone calls the sub a pig boat. An offended Lieutenant Fourtney says that the men can call it a pig boat, but Malzone better keep that ship's name out of his mouth.
The men descend below deck to the torpedo bay where their bunks are located. Several of the sub's crewmen are already there, and they make light of the ruckus caused by the newcomers.
There isn't room for all the UDT men in the sleeping quarters, so the chief sends a few of the men back aft. That will surely only endear the newcomers to this crew. Lieutenant Fourtney offers to take Hayes' orders to the captain while he gets his men sorted, and the orders read, transport the UDT crew to the Marshall Islands, avoid contact with the enemy. Apparently they found the Grayfin after all. It sunk near the Bikini Atoll. The crew is to salvage the equipment so the Japanese doesn't get to it first. So I guess they're going to blow it up. Lieutenant Fourtney wonders why they hauled 24 torpedoes 2,000 miles for nothing. Because it says so here, growls the captain.
Below deck, Seaman Sherman, who is a pretty large guy, is requesting not to sleep on the top bunk because he gets dizzy. Fennelly puts him on a lower bunk so that he won't fall on anyone, and then comments that Sherman is big enough to eat hay.
He's a big guy. Malzone wonders why they're sleeping with the torpedoes. He looks up and sees a perfect place to stick up a picture of his girlfriend.
Meanwhile, Lieutenant Fourtney is showing Lieutenant Hayes around. His men's equipment is in the crew's mess, and Lieutenant Hay tells Fourtney that he doesn't feel he and his men are welcome. So Fourtney sarcastically and dryly says, "Welcome aboard."
Lieutenant Fourtney is not happy that he has to change his mission, because for 2 weeks the Japanese don't have to worry about their torpedoes. And that's why he's angry.
And speaking of the torpedoes, down in the torpedo bay, Seaman Sherman is still complaining about the size of the sleeping quarters, and Fennelly suggests that he just use a little grease to squeeze in between the bunk and the torpedo, and Sherman says that he just hates feeling cooped up.
And Malzone says, you want crowded? Try living with 4 brothers in a 3-room apartment. He never had his own bed till he joined the Navy. And his dream is to buy an island just for him and his girl Roxanne. And when they have kids, each one is going to get their own room.
Everybody takes a moment to muse about this statement, and then Fennelly says it's time to get some sleep. Sleep is kind of his thing.
Well, putting other people to sleep is. Malzone kisses his picture of Roxanne goodnight and slips into a dream, and what a dream this is.
Malzone dreams in color. At least the background is. Malzone and Roxanne, the girl back home, are still in black and white. And he starts to sing about the girl back home, but he is distracted by another, more colorful girl with exciting red lips and hips that make him fly and want to do flips.
Yes, this is a full-length song. It goes on for, 3 minutes, you think? Thereabouts. As the song ends, he still hasn't decided between the two of them. And then he wakes up just as Roxanne's giant mouth moves to devour him. And when he wakes, he bonks his head on a torpedo.
The next day, Fourtney is on deck looking out for other ships, and Lieutenant Hayes comes up to visit. They chit-chat about the sub for a bit, and then Fourtney takes a call from the captain, and the captain says he would like to see Hayes in the wardroom.
And that's wardroom, not war room. We had to listen to it a few times. Now Fennelly is hustling all the men to the mess. He distracts Sherman and makes him conk his head on the tiny door frame. Then Fennelly passes him, saying that going through gracefully is easy. I guess it is when you're not 6'2".
So, Lieutenant Hayes has joined the captain in the wardroom, and the captain would like to go over the plan. All they have to do is travel 1,000 miles through enemy territory and safely deliver the demolition crew to an occupied location. There, they will team up with guerrilla warriors who will take them to the location of the sub so that they can destroy it. Hayes does have one question about this mission, though. What's so important about this sunken submarine?
Radar, says Captain Carey. The Japanese have been slow to develop it on their own. The Grayfin has a microwave radar unit that makes all the ones that they're currently using obsolete, and is miles ahead of what the Japanese are doing.
And so it would be devastating if it fell into enemy hands. Captain Carey goes on to say that the Grayfin had some great men and friends aboard, and he asked that Hayes give her a good send-off.
Yep, leave nothing behind. Then an alarm goes off and we hear, dive, dive, dive. After a few augas, the ship dives under the water. In the mess, the men clumsily lose their lunch, in particular Malzone, who starts pouring coffee into Fennelly's lap.
It's reported that a plane was passing overhead, so they couldn't remain above the surface.
Carey says that he got used to diving, but he can't get used to the periscope. He never knows what he's going to see when it goes up. The crisis averted, they resurface. Some of the crew are playing poker. Seaman Gibbons tries to light a cigar, but his match is immediately snuffed out by one of the subcrew. Gibbons snaps his guitar into pieces and eats it.
You want to say a cigar?
Why?
You said guitar.
I said guitar?
Yeah.
Is it not? Gibbons snaps his cigar into pieces and eats it. Ugh.
It doesn't seem to be too much longer before a convoy ship is sighted, so they dive once again.
One of the subcrew comes into the room where everyone's bunked and hisses, "Silence!" Actually, more than hisses, he yelled it, but nobody was saying anything.
They have to go silent because the ship is using sonar to try to locate the sub. And if they're located, they can deliver presents to the sub. 400-pound presents.
Sherman wonders if it's a U.S. ship up there, but even if there were U.S. ships up there, the Navy thinks that there are no U.S. ships in the area, so they'd probably blow them up first and ask questions later. So it really doesn't matter.
The convoy continues courtesy stock footage, and then the convoy starts dropping bombs. They miss the target, but a few come close, and the impact of the explosions are still felt aboard the sub.
But nevertheless, they've outmaneuvered the enemy. Hayes tells Sherman that they've been through the bad part, and Sherman says, "There's a good part?" I really love Jody McCrea as Seaman Sherman.
I have to say that the water here doesn't seem very deep. You can see the submarine
You can see the bottom and the top of the ocean.
Between the surface where the ships are and the ocean floor.
So I don't know that they'd be able to hide that well. So then the all clear announcement crackles through the loudspeaker. Fennelly barks that maybe we can get some sleep around here now. Then Givens complains about the fans being off because he's really sweaty, but nobody answers him.
And Seaman Nolan, who is part of the subs crew, and who happens to have kind of a smart mouth, comes in to heckle the newbies. He tells Givens that he's looking a little green around the gills.
And then for some reason he says something about putting some beans in this can and tying a label to it. And he and Nolan get into a heated dispute, but it's cut short by the cranky Fennelly.
Fennelly orders Givens back to his bunk and tells Nolan to go elsewhere.
Shove off is what I have. And then Fennelly wonders how long they're going to be cooped up down there with all the other men.
But now it's time for sleep, and for Malzone that means it's once again time to dream. He once again dreams about the girl back home and his dream siren.
It's the same dream, almost exactly the same as the other one. Another wasted 3-4 minutes of this. But this time, the dream leads to happiness. He doesn't wake up and hit his head on a torpedo.
The next day, the demolition crew are doing calisthenics on the deck, led by Fennelly, and Seaman Nolan comes by again to heckle them. He says they look like ballet dancers.
They don't.
Givens has had enough, and the two of them start to fight.
Then a brawl ensues, and Lieutenant Cale orders everyone to clear the deck. They slowly comply, but it's one person down the hatch at a time. Nolan and Givens are the last two down, and as they come down the hatch, so does a lot of water.
The two of them start laughing about their close call, but then Captain Carey announces over the ship's intercom that he wants to see Lieutenant Hayes once diving maneuvers have been completed.
They dove because there was another airplane sighting, and Captain Carey says that they'll stay submerged until they're in the clear. Now Carey's in his office, and he's reading the riot act to Lieutenant Cale and Lieutenant Hayes. He's mad at Cale for allowing the men to brawl when they should have been getting in the ship for a dive. Cale says that they cleared the deck in good order, and Hayes said the men had to get it out of their system because, to them, the sub means fear and confinement.
And one way or another, these emotions were going to present themselves. Carey seems to understand this and tells Hayes to let his men know that they are scheduled to reach Bikini Atoll at 2300 hours.
Yeah, that'll cheer him up. Lieutenant Fourtney is on the bridge scouting for trouble. Down below, the UDT guys are smudging gunk onto their faces. Camouflage.
Malzone is sharpening a stick.
A small stick? It looks like a pencil.
Not sure what he's planning on using it for. And Fennelly says it might come in handy for peeling coconuts.
You gotta have a pointed stick. Now, Captain Carey and Lieutenant Hayes are coordinating the mission. The sub is going to lie submerged until 2000 every night, when it will submerge to recharge. But under no circumstances should the UDT men try to make visual contact. But should anything go wrong and they need to come back to the ship, they will be there.
Carey points out on the map where the crew is to meet the guerrillas and their destination from there.
On the bridge, Captain Carey and Lieutenant Cale have spotted a signal from the island. The UDT men get back in their boat and they paddle to shore. On the way, they spot a Japanese patrol boat, but they make it to shore safely. Well, until they get out of the boat.
As the men are starting to gather their gear, each of them is one by one accosted and waylaid and held to the ground at knife point by a mysterious stranger.
But it turns out that the natives and the old man were only holding them down because the patrol boat was passing, and they didn't want to get spotted. Then the old man welcomes them to the island, and everyone starts to unpack. The old man leads them to a campfire. Seaman Davayo translates for his men because he speaks their language, and what he tells them is that the Japanese are 10 miles from here, but that the jungle will protect them. Hayes, through Davayo, asks about the American sub that sank a few days ago. They know where it is, and Paul, a Filipino boy, volunteers to show the men where to find it.
There is a woman among the group. Her name is Reiko, and she's gathering a bunch of equipment and strapping it to her back. She has to do this because Chief don't carry his own gear.
Hayes orders Sherman and Givens to stay behind and brush up on their Tagalog, which is the Filipino language.
So Paul is leading Davayo, Malzone, and Hayes, and Reiko, and they're all going to where the sub is. Back at the camp, Fennelly tries to share some of his food with the leader of the guerrillas, but he doesn't care for it.
It looks like a can of cat food, and even Fennelly didn't want to eat it, so I don't blame him. But at least he tried it before spitting it out.
Back with the away team, they have to lay low as Japanese soldiers patrol nearby. Eventually, they make it to where the sub is supposed to be, but the Japanese seem to have already found it. There's a patrol unit and a plane on the shore, but if they can see the Japanese on the shore, the Japanese can probably see them as well, and they are indeed spotted.
So they have to leg it. Once again, they hide in the brush as Japanese soldiers pass by, but this time Paul steals away from the rest of the group for some reason, and he finds himself facing a Japanese soldier. He punches the man, and the soldier fires his gun. Paul takes off running, leading the soldiers away from his crew.
Then, for some reason, he runs straight into a waiting soldier's bayonet.
Ouch.
I don't even know how to describe that. It's so stupid.
I know.
The guy's just sitting there.
It's just like he's waiting to catch anything that he gets on the hook.
Reiko hears him cry out and chases after him, and Lieutenant Hayes chases after her, catches her and throws her to the ground. They wrestle and he pins her down. She slaps him and he slaps her back, causing her to fall in love with him.
Well, the fight's over anyways. The men return to the camp. Reiko tells Kauai, the leader of the men, that Paul died. Hayes tells his men, that would be Fennelly and the rest, that the situation couldn't be worse. The bay is full of ships, and the only way to complete the mission is to go in by water. But that's going to be a suicide mission. The men look pretty grim, but Fennelly tells them all to get some sleep.
Yep, that's his thing.
That's his job. Puts everyone to bed.
As Lieutenant Hayes is sleeping, Reiko starts rubbing his brow. He awakens and she tears open his shirt, rubbing his chest. He says that's very nice. Then she has him roll over so she can rub his back.
She's doing all this with oil. She's dipping her fingers into some oil or lard or I don't know what. But he likes it.
Yeah, he requests that she go a little higher. And then Hayes says it's a shame that she doesn't understand English because if she did, he'd tell her how beautiful she is. But she seems to understand this anyway, and they kiss.
The next morning, as they pack up to go, some of the native women who are with the group rush to the camp. Through Davayo, who's translating, they say that there's a Japanese cutter ship coming down the coast. It's a spy ship, and it's searching the coves, and it'll be there in 1 hour. That's trouble, says Fennelly.
Lieutenant Hayes has an idea, but it's going to require the help of the guerrillas.
And without further ado, that plan has been put into motion. Malzone is supposed to watch the girls in the bay. Gibbons is manning the gun. He's going to shoot the antenna off the boat when he gets it in his sights. And as for the women in the group, they are skinny dipping to distract the men on the spy ship when it pulls into the lagoon.
They shout out Konnichiwa, and the men aboard the spy ship are pleased with their good fortune. But their mood shifts considerably when they are suddenly fired upon by Gibbons and Malzone and Fennelly. The Japanese shoot back, Fennelly is hit, and so is Reiko. Hayes runs to Reiko and apologizes to her for putting her in this position as she dies.
Yeah, they say a tearful goodbye, but they did succeed in stopping the boat. The men carry a wounded Fennelly back to one of their boats.
That night, the team is starting on their mission. First, they have to drop off a wounded Fennelly. The team leaves Fennelly and Sherman in the raft to wait for the sub to emerge so that Sherman might give Captain Carey the message about all the ships in the bay. And Fennelly could probably use a good night's sleep.
And they probably have a medic on board too, to help with his wound.
And having dropped them off, now it's time for the crew to start their mission.
They head back towards the island, but they're not going to go back to the shore. In the boat, they're putting on their scuba gear. Well, everyone is except Gibbons. He's going to be manning the guns. He'll stay behind and he'll take out anyone on land.
On the sub, Sherman is being treated like royalty. He's enjoying a cup of Java with Captain Carey. Lieutenant Fourtney comes in and he and the captain review their battle plan. They're going to have to sneak up the coast and try to take out the enemy ship.
Whatever they're doing, they're plotting it out on a map of Mexico. So best of luck to them. But the plan is for Sherman to swim down and join the men in their mission. And even though he doesn't have scuba gear, he says he's got the best lungs in the Navy. So he'll be all right. Now Davayo is piloting the boat in the bay. They're flying a Japanese flag, and since he's Asian, they could get away with passing as not Americans for a while anyway. They're going towards the salvage boat, which is waiting by the submarine.
The crew of the salvage boat has their gun pointed at the boat, and Davayo keeps shouting at them in Japanese to delay any incursion. But as it gets closer, the salvage boat fires anyway, as the boat continues to approach them. Then Hayes dives in to join his comrades and not get shot.
Davayo shoots back, and then he rams into the boat, exploding it due to the explosives in the front of his boat, I guess. We just sort of see a cutaway that shows a bunch of bombs down there.
And this creates quite the fireworks display.
Right. It's kind of a bad effect, but whatever, we'll go with it. But anyway, it does mean that Davayo is dead, and that's really sad.
He's gone down with the ship.
Well, he went down in flames.
So Lieutenant Hayes, Seaman Malzone, and Seaman Gibbons continue their mission beneath the surface. But this time, Sherman has come over to join them.
He's just wearing a bathing suit, but they're in scuba gear.
He does have a mask. They're happy to share their oxygen with him.
I think it's called companion breathing, when one person has a tank and the other one doesn't. The divers are attaching something to the sunken sub. There's a lot of bubbling going on, so it looks like they're trying to put some floats in there, but they're also adding some bombs to the mix as well. We're not really sure because it's a very murky print of the movie, and it's black and white to begin with, so we can't really tell what's going on. We're just going to give you our best guess here.
Apparently they finished the job, and Sherman leads them back to the sub.
On the sub, the one that's not sunk, Captain Carey is waiting impatiently for the men to return. After a long while of not hearing from them, they hear a knock on the outside of the sub. It's the crew, and they let them in. Fennelly greets them warmly, and then he asks about Davayo. Everyone just stares at him, uncomfortably. Then we see the Greyfin start to lift up off the floor of the ocean, and then it explodes. Captain Carey says that it's time to get out of there. They put up the periscope and see enemy ships approaching, and then they fire torpedoes. 1, 2, 3, 4, and they destroy the ship. As for the rest of the ships, well, they're in luck because a squadron of American planes are going to take them out for them. And we get to see the whole battle take place. There's men flying out of the ship as it explodes. And once that's all concluded, Captain Carey determines that the sub can go. War is hell, and war movies even more so. Malzone celebrates the victory, but as he returns to his bunk, he notices that his picture of his girl, Roxanne, is gone. And then he stupidly asks where that torpedo went before finally realizing that it, along with a picture of Roxanne, was used to blow up a ship. Haha. And that's almost the end.
The film closes with a bit of narration presented by one William Shatner.
Uncredited.
A tiny coral atoll, a barren spot on the face of the vast Pacific, bypassed, overlooked, ignored by man for 2,000 years. Its name would not be heard again until it became synonymous with the greatest destructive force ever known. How will men remember Bikini? As a way station in the War of the Pacific? As a symbol of the atomic future? Perhaps. But man mocks his fate and laughs at destiny. And chances are, Bikini will be remembered for something else. Not a bomb, and not a battle, but a bathing suit.
And then, as the closing credits fly up on the screen, for some reason, AIP has chosen to show us, this is color, by the way, 2 women in bikinis having a picnic on the beach, playing catch with a beach ball, basically frolicking about, smoking cigarettes out of one of those fancy long cigarette holders. And then the frames freeze at awkward moments, like when the girl falls down or another one gets hit in the face with a beach ball, or one of them is coughing due to puffing on that cigarette. It's bizarre, but it's the end. Welcome back to the American International Podcast, where we're talking about Operation Bikini from 1963.
The February 21st, 1962 edition of Variety reported that the film, provisionally titled Sea Fighters, would be a joint production between American International Pictures and Italian International Pictures, but apparently the Italians dropped out, as Alta Vista was the production house for the film.
Nearly 4 months later, Variety's June 13th issue included Operation Bikini on a list of upcoming A pictures from AIP. It marked the directorial debut of film editor Anthony Carras. Rory Calhoun was originally announced as a film star, but the lead eventually went to Tab Hunter, of course. It was Hunter's first Hollywood film since The Pleasure of His Company in 1960.
Filming began in November of 1962 and took place at Republic Studios. A Daily Variety blurb from December 10, 1963 noted that the title had been officially changed to Operation Bikini, after briefly being known as Bikini. On December 7, 1962, Daily Variety revealed that actresses Judy Lewis and Nancy Ducina were formerly bunnies at the Playboy Club in Chicago, Illinois.
According to the AIP press book, full-size, fully equipped portions of the interior and decks of the sub were constructed at Republic Studios under the guidance of former submarine skipper Captain Charles Freeman of the U.S. Navy. The cast was outfitted with actual underwater equipment used by the Navy, including scuba suits, fins, masks, and the heavy oxygen tanks. Another Navy man, Art Stanfield, served as technical advisor for the film, and the island scenes were filmed on a set constructed on the back lot of the studio.
Daily Variety reported that composer Les Baxter began recording his score in March of 1963. 2 weeks later, Variety said director Anthony Carras was in New York City, where editing was nearly completed. Operation Bikini's hit single, The Girl Back Home, was written by Robert P. Marcucci and Russell Faith, and of course was sung by Frankie Avalon.
Many of the underwater shots used stock footage from previous submarine movies like Destination Tokyo, Up Periscope, and Run Silent, Run Deep, and that footage was shared by all 3 of those movies, and also Operation Bikini. The recognizable scenes in Malzone's dream sequence, the little travelogue that flashes behind him, are Diamond Head, Hawaii, Cook's Bay, Maria, a silhouette of Maria as seen from Tahiti, and Mount Otamanu in Bora Bora.
In one scene inside the submarine, Scott Brady, Michael Dante, and Jody McCrea discuss the operation, and they use a map of the Mexican state of Baja California. It reads Mexico, Baja California, West Coast, Bahia de San Quintin.
So that's just a little fun thing to look for if you watch the movie. Operation Bikini opened on May 15, 1963 in Los Angeles. In some areas, the film was released on a double bill with the movie California. That's one of our earlier episodes.
Hungarian actress Eva Six, who made her U.S. film debut in this picture, got a write-up in the AIP press book that said she looks amazingly like the late Marilyn Monroe, sounds exactly like Zsa Zsa Gabor, and possesses a figure combining the attributes of both sexations, and has a winning personality and a winning talent that is uniquely her own. Her birth name was Eva Klein. James Nicholson is the one who dubbed her Eva Six.
Eva appeared at the March 26, 1963 premiere in New London, Connecticut, where the U.S. Naval submarine base was located. The March 22nd Daily Variety reported that lead actor Tab Hunter was unable to attend the premiere as his prized horse was undergoing surgery.
Eva Six next visited Cambridge, Massachusetts, where the April 3rd Daily Variety noted that she was removed from the Harvard University campus after posing for publicity photographs with a fellow Hungarian expatriate.
Taglines for the film include The Untold Story of the Navy's Underwater Demolition Teams,
Only the Good Die Young, and There Ain't a Saint on Board,
The Go-Go Boys Who Go All the Way, On a Beachhead or in a Beach House.
Tab Hunter, Frankie Avalon, Gary Crosby, and Jody McCrea are the submarine boys who met a beautiful gorilla girl.
Boy, most of these taglines have nothing to do with the movie. The AIP press book recommended that theater owners offer free admission to any woman who showed up to the theater in a bikini, saying that the appearance of a group of girls who might be members of the Tab Hunter or Frankie Avalon fan clubs, all clad in brief bikinis, will make a surefire publicity photo for your local newspaper or a TV newsreel film clip. And just remember that we did say this movie opened in March, so any girls who did that were very brave.
In addition to many other bikini-related ideas for promoting the film, AIP offered copies of The Girl Back Home for 12 cents to use as a promotional giveaway. We have the address to order copies of the record, so if you're interested, DM us.
It's only 12 cents. There was also a comic book based on the film that AIP offered for promotional use, as well as an exclusive caricature featuring the main cast. And we have that as well. We'll post it on our socials.
Reception for Operation Bikini was tepid at best. The monthly film bulletin said, for the most part, this is a conventional but competent production. The acting as a whole was never less than competent, but had issues with the final scenes, which involved a nuclear blast, then a whole series of shots of a couple of girls playing on the seashore in bikinis.
The Los Angeles Times said that the film might be titled Operation Smorgasbord, since it's a combination of South Sea Island melodrama, war story, and comedy, and Daily Variety agreed with them and called the film weak. Box Office Magazine said in its review that the producers brought in, to interest male fans, a color dream sequence and also the closing credits in which bikini-clad girls parade on a beach to tie in with the title. And they also noted that, in addition to young Gary Crosby, another famous son, Jody McCrea, makes a strong impression as an athletic young seaman, as does Michael Dante as the chief officer, making a total of 6 personable players, counting Avalon, Hunter, and Scott Brady, to attract the feminine fans.
Wasn't Scott Brady Captain Carey?
Yeah. They're really reaching there.
In April of 1963, Variety reported that the National Legion of Decency considered the picture morally objectionable in part for all, due to its gratuitous introduction of suggestive costuming and situations.
A news item in the March 25th, 1963 edition of the LA Times stated that AIP would not allow its theatrical films to be broadcast on television for a minimum of 5 years. The first 2 pictures released under this policy were Operation Bikini and The Raven, both in 1963.
In his autobiography, Tab Hunter said of this film, despite the title, the suggestive ads featuring the producer's buxom girlfriend in a skimpy swimsuit, and Frankie Avalon as one of the co-stars, Operation Bikini was not a beach party movie. Oh no, it was another war movie. Frankie sings about going home surrounded by warheads. Only AIP would have the chutzpah to advertise a story about the development of the atomic bomb with the tagline, "Temptation in Paradise, neither hell nor high heels could stop them."
Now, of course, we've seen these cast members in other AIP movies before. Tab Hunter, who played Lieutenant Hayes, would go on to be in War Gods of the Deep in 1965.
Frankie Avalon, of course, appeared in a number of projects for AIP, including Alakazam the Great in 1960, Panic in Year Zero in 1962, Beach Party in 1963. 1964 brought us Muscle Beach Party, Bikini Beach, and Pajama Party. 1965, we saw Beach Blanket Bingo, Ski Party, How to Stuff a Wild Bikini, Sergeant Deadhead, and Dr. Goldfoot and the Bikini Machine. 1966 brought us Fireball 500. 1967, we saw The Million Eyes of Sumeru. And lastly was Horror House in 1969.
Scott Brady, who played Captain Carey, would go on to appear in The Cycle of Savages in 1969, a trans-American film. And Jim Backus, who was first mate Ed Fennelly, would be in Friday Foster in 1975 and Chomps in 1979.
Jody McCrea, who played Seaman Sherman, appeared in Beach Party in 1963, in 1964 in Muscle Beach Party, Bikini Beach, and Pajama Party. In 1965, we saw him in Beach Blanket Bingo and How to Stuff a Wild Bikini. And in 1967, he appeared in The Glory Stompers.
Eva Six, Reiko, was in Beach Party in 1963. Aniki Aleong, who was Seaman Davayo, was in Motorcycle Gang in 1957. And David Landfield, who was Lieutenant Cale, appeared in Beach Party in 1963.
Richard Bakalyan, who played Seaman Hiller, had appeared in The Cool and the Crazy and The Bonnie Parker Story, both in 1958, Paratroop Command in 1959, and Panic in Year Zero in 1962.
Raymond Guth, who played Seaman Rich, who we didn't really see much, was in The Bonnie Parker Story in 1958 in an uncredited role, and Steve Mitchell, who was Seaman Nolan, was in Gunslinger in 1956, Submarine Seahawk in 1958, and would go on to appear in Bloody Mama in 1970 and in Chomps with Jim Backus in 1979.
Dwayne Emmett, who played Seaman Kingsley, appeared in Beach Party in 1963, Muscle Beach Party in 1964, and Beach Blanket Bingo in 1965.
And Mark Cavill, who played Paul, was in The Wild Angels in 1966 and Devil's Angels in 1967. All right, Jeff, we've sat through this movie. We've heard what everyone else has to say about it, but why don't we talk about how we feel using our AIP scale, where A is awesome, I is intermediate, and P is pathetic.
Well, unless you count California, Operation Bikini is the first of a handful of war movies produced and or released by AIP that we will be covering on the podcast. As they say, war is hell, and watching Operation Bikini may not have been quite that bad, but it was close. I feel the movie should be more exciting than it plays out. The idea of having to sneak through enemy territory to destroy a submarine before said enemy is able to retrieve its intel sounds intriguing, until you realize that you're in a submarine and all you have to do is hide and wait whenever you're in danger of being spotted. Movies that involve a lot of hiding and waiting will usually require a little something extra to draw the audience in. But what Operation Bikini does have going for it is its cast. Tab Hunter, who we would come to know as Ben Harris in War Gods of the Deep, which we covered in episode 37 of American International Podcast, seems to fit his role better in Operation Bikini than he did in War Gods of the Deep. Or maybe his wooden acting style just fits better with the character of a Navy lieutenant on a suicide mission. Other recognizable faces, at least to us regular audiences of AIP product, are, of course, Frankie Avalon and Jody McCrea. And then we have Jim Backus, only a few months away from appearing on television as Thurston Howell III. His presence is really what made the movie for me. When Frankie Avalon's Joseph Malzone is sharpening his stick and Jim Backus's Ed Fennelly says he could use it to break open coconuts, I couldn't help but flash forward to Gilligan's Island. Which, of course, could not have been the film's intention, but being able to apply my knowledge of the future made this just a little more enjoyable to me. I do want to take a moment to mention Frankie's musical interlude / dream sequence. I have one question. Why? The sequence could have been cut and would have absolutely no bearing on the story. There's not even a payoff to him dreaming and singing about two girls. And we're subjected to the sequence twice, because apparently it's a recurring dream. And I can't help but wonder if it was AIP or Frankie who spearheaded the inclusion of the song. Now, AIP had been pulling the trick of a brief color sequence in an otherwise black and white movie since I Was a Teenage Frankenstein in 1957, and had used it several times since. But surely the novelty of this must have worn off by 1963. And so I found Operation Bikini to move a little slowly, and it was really the familiar faces that kept me interested, much more so than the plot. So I have to give Operation Bikini an intermediate rating of I. What did you think, Cheryl?
Sometimes when I have to watch yet another Frankie Avalon film forced upon me by the random movie generator, I wonder, what sins have I committed to deserve such a fate? Well, not really. It's kind of dramatic, but man, does Frankie Avalon get on my nerves sometimes. But the truth is, it's not really Avalon's fault that I find him so annoying here. Unlike you, I think it was an AIP decision to put those dream sequences in the movie, because they could have overridden him if it was his idea. If AIP hadn't insisted, for reasons known only to them, that Avalon break character and perform that mediocre dream sequence song twice, I actually wouldn't have minded him that much in this movie. Because in truth, to misquote another one of the podcasts available from the Pop Culture Entertainment Group, this movie is fine. It's a serviceable war movie with some decent action. The performances from actors like Tab Hunter, Scott Brady, Michael Dante, and my favorite of the bunch, Jody McCrea, they're also fine. Nobody's winning an Oscar here, but they do the job they were paid to do well enough. I know you liked Jim Backus' performance in this movie, but I thought he was kind of miscast here. For one thing, he's too old, I think. He's 50 when this movie was filmed, and he only seems to be there to tell everyone it's bedtime. Even so, that's not enough to knock the movie down a grade for me, and Avalon seems to fit into the group well enough, or he would have if AIP had not put those dream sequences in. Honestly, just like you, I can't get over the fact that they're in the movie and twice. They're so pointless. This movie isn't about Malzone. It's an ensemble movie. It's about the mission and the men who must complete it. And like you said, there's no payoff. The choice he sings about in the song between the girl he left behind and the other hot woman, it's not something that ever comes up in the movie. And like you, I wondered, does he dream this every night? Does he need a psychoanalyst? Drugs? Who knows? The whole sequence is just egregious. And also egregious is the end of the movie, where narrator Bill Shatner attempts to connect the dots between the atomic bomb tests on Bikini Atoll and the popular swimmer of the day, with those awkward picnic scenes and the unflattering freeze frames under the closing credits. There is absolutely no reason for that to be there, especially coming as it does at the end of a movie about World War II, where we had to watch 3 characters die to complete the mission. R.I.P. Paul, Davayo, and Reiko, you deserved a better send-off. These terrible choices, and I blame AIP for them, ruined what would otherwise be an okay movie for me. I feel I have no choice but to give Operation Bikini a P for pathetic, but the blame for that is all on AIP, not Frankie Avalon. Well, I think we've completed the mission that was this episode of the American International Podcast. I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And I'm Jeff Markin.
And we'll meet you at the drive-in.
Follow the American International Podcast on Instagram and Letterboxd at AIP_pod and on Facebook at facebook.com/American International Podcast.
The American International Podcast is produced and edited by Jeff Markin.
A man whose mind is distorted by hatred.
And Cheryl Lightfoot.
A girl hungry for too many things.
The American International Podcast is part of the Pop Culture Entertainment Network.